Hello there, I'm Ananya Dasgupta and welcome to this very special show. Over the last 9 years or so, CNN-IBN has been honoring Indians who've excelled in their fields. Today we're taking a look at individuals and organizations who are not just working for themselves but for society. Here are our nominees in the public service category. The 6 nominees in this category for this year's Indian of the Year. The first, Azim Premji, leading the way for corporates to give back to society. Dr. M.R. Rajgopal, father of palliative care, fighting for rights of patients with severe pain to live and die with dignity. The Indian Army and the NDRF. There's Sulabh International as well. Tongam Rina, a journalist from Arunachal Pradesh, and P. Vijayan, an IPS officer. These are our 6 nominees, and we'll be joined by our panelists this evening as well. Jaya Jetli, president and founder of the Dastari Heart Samiti, is joining us here on CNN-IBN with us. Reema Nanavati, the director of the Economic and Rural Development Wing of SEWA, she's joining us from Ahmedabad, and Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, the president of the Lok Satta Party, is with us from Hyderabad as well. Before we come to all 3 of you, let's take a closer look at our 6 nominees this year in the public service category.
As 2014 ends, we are celebrating the men and women who blazed a trail in the category of public service this year. Azim Premji, chairperson of Wipro, launched the Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiative this year to fund non-profit organizations working in key areas like nutrition, disabilities and governance. An engineering graduate from Stanford, Premji has given away more than $4 billion in the last 4 years, making him one of India's biggest philanthropists. Considered the father of palliative care in India, Dr. Rajgopal has campaigned tirelessly to let millions in pain get access to morphine. His efforts saw the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act that restricted the use of the painkiller get amended this year. Dr. Rajgopal has tirelessly worked to defend the right of patients with severe pain to live and die with dignity. It was all boots on the ground for the Indian Army and the NDRF when its worst floods in 100 years devastated Jammu and Kashmir. A force previously seen as hostile by Kashmiris won many hearts and minds as it worked tirelessly to rescue people. CNN-IBN salutes the 1.3 million force that truly embodies the spirit of whatever it takes. Along with the Indian Army, the NDRF, set up in 2006, helped in the rescue of thousands of people and distributed tons of relief material during the J&K deluge. Our next nominee is an organization that has been working to improve the nation's cleanliness, sanitation and hygiene. Years before PM Narendra Modi made Swachh Bharat a national priority, Sulabh International, led by its founder Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak, kick-started the Toilet for Every House campaign. Today, almost 15 million people across the country use toilets based on Sulabh's low-cost design. Not even bullets can silence this journalist. Tongam Rina, the associate editor of Arunachal Times. 2 years ago, she was shot at close range for writing against the endemic corruption in her state. Now recovered from her injuries, she continues her journalism of courage, highlighting how hydro dams and tribal fault lines are tearing Arunachal apart. Reena is the only Indian journalist to find a place in the list of 100 information heroes released by Reporters Without Borders this year. And last but not least, IPS officer P. Vijayan. He is the force behind the Student Police Cadet project that started in Kerala and is now set to go national. The project trains high school students to respect the law and develop empathy for vulnerable sections of society. Vijayan's own journey from a child labourer to an IPS officer is not just an inspiration to many. It has also motivated him to initiate several novel schemes to promote education among poor children.
Let me get our panelists' first reaction on our list of 6 nominees. Jay Jetli, if I begin with you, let's take our nominees in groups of 2. We have first got Azim Premji, who's leading the way for corporates to give back to society, and also M.R. Rajagopal, who's considered to be the father of palliative care in India. Your thoughts?
Well, I would salute all the nominees. I think each of them is doing a wonderful job. In the two names that you've given me, Azim Premji, of course, is a name everyone knows, and he has done a lot. Corporates, we feel for a long time that it's time the corporates really gave back to society, and I think he's doing his duty well. There are many all over the world examples of this, and therefore I don't think it's a very innovative path to take, and therefore I would go with something where there is a heart and soul in doing something which is the next Dr. Rajgopal, because doctors of course have always been trained to give you some medicine, put a pipe in where you perhaps don't need it, keep you alive somehow. But recently there's been a lot of literature and a lot of wonderful inspirational thought on how we have to think about the time when everybody will die. How do we die with grace, dignity and no pain? Everyone has to die sometime, but we don't want to die suffering, which causes us misery and those around us misery, because they don't know whether to put us out of our pain or whether to stop it somehow when there perhaps may not be any medicine. I recently read a book by Atul Gawande on this, Being Mortal, and I think it brought this issue very closely to my heart. Right. And therefore I would say that Dr. Rajgopal going a step beyond what doctors are supposed to do is really wonderful.
All right, wonderful thoughts. Reema Nanavati, your thoughts, ma'am, on the work and contribution of these two individuals?
Sure. I think first and foremost I would applaud all the 6 nominees, and I think exemplary work and demonstrating to the nation as a whole. Amongst the 2 that you have asked me to really rate, I think Azim Premji is setting the trend for the Indian corporates and corporate honchos that what philanthropy actually means. And I would see from the point of view of, how do you bring happiness, how do you reduce sufferings, and how do you make everybody feel that, this is just and an equitable place for them, the world is a better place for living. But I think I would really also support strongly the work of Dr. Rajgopal, because I think it's not just thinking of cure, but beyond cure. So how do you really bring, reduce the suffering, manage the patient in such a way, and, reduce the sufferings and let the soul also rest in peace.
I think you agree with Jai Jetli there. Dr. Jaiprakash Narayan, your thoughts?
All 6 are terrific names, as my co-panelists have said, and these 2 are very great choices. But I would slightly take a different view, because both represent 2 spectrums. I always believe that in this country, the 2 great sins are unfulfilled potential and avoidable suffering. Azim Premji's work in education through his foundation is essentially about fulfilling this unfulfilled potential. Dr. Rajgopal's work is about this suffering, alleviation of this suffering. Both are incredibly important. But between the 2, I would say I would probably put Premji's work in terms of its impact on the country a little higher, simply because A, he's looking at it systemically. Right. How do you improve the quality of school education and university education? And B, he is a trailblazer in India, becoming almost like a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett. That much of your wealth is actually for the community. That is the concept of Mahatma Gandhi. And putting your foot where your money where your mouth is. And in that sense, I think he deserves to be respected. Rajgopal's work, all are important contributions.
All right,
but we have to pick somebody. If I were to pick somebody between these 2, I would say Premji probably scores higher.
All right, and the next 2 nominees are not individuals, they're organizations. The Indian Army and the NDRF for their work in Jammu and Kashmir relief, and also the Sulabh International for leading the way in terms of sanitation and hygiene. Jai Jetli, your thoughts on the next 2 nominees?
Sulabh one is known for years, and they have been awarded a lot, and it's very, very deserving. But in this case, I would pick the Indian Army, because they are always vilified in every kind of trouble spot. They have had a lot to face in Kashmir, and they have been doing a lot of development work on the borders and everything. But when somebody internationally or those who are not well-wishers of us want to blame someone, they blame the army because that is the core, and the army is never allowed to speak out. The Jawan goes into any kind of work, whether it's flood relief or securing our borders, he goes with that thought in his mind that he may not return. And I think the fact that they cannot say anything, they cannot disobey an order, and yet they do such a fantastic job, better than any civilian organization, which somehow tends to fail at the last minute. I think it's time that these unrecognized heroes, we recognize them also when they die only, which is very sad. I think the fact that they had saved so many lives is a wonderful thing, and to honor the army in peacetime in work like this is something that they really deserve.
All right, Reema Nanavati, would you agree with that?
I have been working in Kashmir in the line of control areas and in the districts there, and I've had a closer look at the Indian Army's work and the NDRF and the Air Force as well. And I think, saluting at such times, bringing out the yeoman's service that the Army also does, will be a great inspiration to the younger generation of Kashmir as well as of India as a whole. And therefore, I think, but I would also equally respect the work of Sulabh International, that, they have been thinking about, again, how do you bring dignity, how do you bring self-respect closer to even the ones who are deprived of a very common service which we people take for granted, which is like sanitation, and how it compounds the misery and sufferings of the ones who are deprived of this service.
Right. A tough choice, I understand, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, but what would you say?
Very tough choice. I would, between the two, armed forces have done a great job, there's no question about it, and I'm particularly very grateful to the armed forces, because every member of the armed forces, he comes out with a tremendous sense of confidence and specific skills. But what Sulabh has done over the past 20 years is remarkable. In a country where there is a lot of aversion to even discussing issues of hygiene and sanitation, it's not fashionable or sexy, they have taken it up doggedly, in a determined manner. And eventually now it became a national issue thanks to the political will and Mr. Narendra Modi's slogan. And for this Swachh Bharat to become actually a reality, we must celebrate the work of Sulabh and a man called R.S. Bharati in Tamil Nadu, in Alandur. I have not even met him, but he did remarkable work in urban settings, giving 100% sewerage. So unless we celebrate this, unless we bring it to the national limelight, our goal of achieving full sanitation in every respect in the next 5 years will not be accomplished. Therefore, while I respect the army, salute it, and it's indispensable for the country's integrity and the future security, I would say in the specific context, my vote goes to Sulabh.
All right. I think you summed it up very well, saying the work that Sulabh International is doing is bringing sanitation and hygiene, making it more fashionable and sexy. We'll just take a very short break here at this point. Be back with your thoughts on the final two nominees, and if we ask you to take your pick. Just take a very short break and be right back. You're joining us on our special show on CNN IBN's Indian of the Year, and these are the nominees in the public service category. We are talking to our panel of experts on their views about who deserves the award this year. Jaya Jaitley, Reema Nanavati and Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan continue to be with us. Jaya Jaitley, again, your final thoughts on the final two nominees in this list, Tongam Rina, Arunachal journalist, and P. Vijayan, IPS officer. And if I were to ask you to pick one among the six, who would it be?
Between these two, it's really difficult to say, because they have not only gone beyond their call of duty and normal area of work, but they have risen above so many of their own social problems. And I wish they could both share the award. But I would say, as a woman, for a journalist, as a woman it's tough, as a journalist it's tough. And in those kind of areas, and border areas in Arunachal Pradesh and all, it's very, very difficult to get your voice heard in the rest of the country, let alone the rest of the world. And we tend to ignore, whether it's militancy or any sort of difficulties or corruption certainly, in the northeastern states. And we kind of look at it in an idealistic way
Right.
from wherever we are. And I think the fact that she faced the kind of bullets that she did and that she carries on with her work is really commendable. So many, many salutes to the IPS officer. My vote would go with the woman.
All right, Rima Nanavati, what do you think? Who would be your final pick among the 6 nominees in the public service category?
I think both of them are equally compelling, and therefore I have been thinking because one demonstrates what does freedom of expression mean, and the other one in this current days of security concerns for the adolescents and the young girls and women. But I think, fearlessly being very transparent, fearlessly being very open, and, making the countrymen informed and aware. I think that is what is real empowerment means. And I think being a journalist from Arunachal Pradesh, and that to a woman, I would really, salute the journalist Rani from Arunachal Pradesh. But I would also say that, what Commissioner Vijayan has done is also equally important
So your
in
vote
this
goes
current
for
scenario
Tongam Rina.
where we are really concerned about the security of women.
Dr. Jaiprakash Narayan, who would your vote go for? You have 6 nominees. Who would your vote go for?
Of all the 6 you're talking about?
Yes, all 6.
Or these 2?
No, all 6. If I were to ask you, among these 6, if you had to pick one, and you are pointing out that it's a tough choice, who would it be?
It's a very difficult choice in cases like this. Therefore, it's not fair to say somebody is number 1. But I'm simply putting things in context. What India today needs is a mission, a vision, and an inspiring example, and an undiluted effort, relentless effort, because we're very good with sloganeering in this country, but we're not very good at dogged pursuit. So given all that, I would say my vote among the 6 would go at this point of time to Sulabh International, because we need to really pursue this dramatically. And it's actually a vote not merely for Sulabh, but for the many, many people, unsung heroes, who are doing a remarkable job in a very difficult area to promote sanitation, hygiene, dignity, and health of the rural populations, of women, of children, and of convenience for the elderly people.
Right.
And therefore, I would say for that reason, my vote would go to Sulabh.
All right, so your vote would go to Sulabh International because of the dogged pursuit that they have shown in these areas. Let's just tell our viewers that the final results will be out on our website, ibnlive.com, in a couple of weeks from now. You've heard from our panel this evening, and our eminent panel of jurists will be taking this decision very soon, and will be putting that out here on CNN IBN. Thanks very much to all 3 of you for joining us here, Jaya Jaitley, Rima Nanavati, and Dr. Jaiprakash Narayan, for sharing your thoughts and your points of view. We'd like our viewers to keep their feedback and their votes coming in as well on ibnlive.com. Thanks very much for joining us.